Hey everyone, this is Lomi, and today I'll be walking you through how to sew a shirt for Littlefee and similar YoSD size dolls. You can find a copy of this pattern on my website, linked in the video description. So we'll go through as much of the construction as we can right off the bat. Start with the two collar pieces and sew them with right sides together, up the sides and across the top. This actually isn't the collar I use in the end because it turned out I hadn't cut it exactly right and it didn't fit correctly. Construction is the same though. Next, switch to a zigzag stitch and finish the bottom edge of the sleeves. This pattern is made with short sleeves, but it's easy to alter them to longer sleeves if you want. Going back to a straight stitch, fold the bottom edge of the sleeve up about 1/4 of an inch and sew it down for a nice hem. Repeat this for both sleeves. Next, we'll attach the placket to the straight edge of the shirt front. It doesn't matter so much on solid color fabric, but if you're using a print or pattern, put the right side of the placket against the wrong side of the shirt front. This placket will be longer than the shirt front. That's normal. Sew both sides this way, making sure they're a mirror image of each other. You'll press this open and then fold the other edge of the placket in 1/4 of an inch, then over to the right side to create a nicely finished placket. Before I continue, I'm going to use contrasting thread and a decorative stitch on my machine to add a little something extra to the sleeves. Lots of modern machines come with shaped stitches that can be used for this. Mine just has a few, but they're marked in green and show the correct settings for each stitch next to the setting dials. Using these with colored or special threads can add a lot of interest to a doll's outfit. For mine, I'm using a stitch that looks like little squares, along with black thread. You just have to be careful when you use these stitches to make sure the fabric is feeding properly. The second sleeve didn't go through quite right, so one side is a big blob of black thread. I'll have to pick this out and do it over. Not only is that a big waste of time, but it messed up the nail polish I just put on too. Man. Before I go any further, I take my pieces to the ironing board and press the plackets. This gives me nice, crisp edges. I'll sew this down with a straight stitch, then add top stitching down the other side just to make it look uniform and a little more polished. Take your time and get the stitches straight. You'll do the plackets on both sides. Then it's time to pin the front and back pieces with right sides together and sew the shoulder seams. I like to backstitch at both the sleeve and collar edges to ensure it won't pull apart when I'm finishing the garment. Then finish the edges of the seam with the zigzag stitch. I've got a lot of threads tangled up here now, so I take a second to trim them and cut off the extra length of the plackets. Then I pin a sleeve into the armhole with right sides of fabric together. When sewing something this small, sometimes pins are a little awkward, so I just pin to make sure it's fitting well. Then I use a needle and thread to quickly baste the pieces together. This temporary, loosely stitched seam will hold the sleeve right where I need it to sew it in by machine. Carefully machine sew the sleeve in place, then pull out the basting thread. This will look great when it's ironed. I'll sew in the other sleeve the same way, then finish the edges with a zigzag stitch. Once both sleeves are in, it's time to close and finish the sides. I pin the side closed and sew the side shut from the sleeve to the bottom edge of the shirt, turning at the armpit. Make sure you backstitch at both the edge of the sleeve and the bottom of the shirt so these seams won't ravel. Then finish the edge with a zigzag stitch. Close both sides the same way. To finish the bottom edge of the shirt, fold the edge up toward the inside of the garment, 1/4 of an inch and then another 1/4 inch, creating a rolled hem. It's useful to press this at the ironing board before sewing, especially when working so small. I backstitch at both the beginning and end of this seam. The last part of the garment construction is adding the collar. Make sure you've turned it right side out and ironed it flat. Then, putting right sides together, put the collar against the back of the shirt and pin the open bottom edge of the collar to the collar opening on the shirt. You may be more comfortable sewing this by hand since it's so small. If you do it by machine like me, just make sure you go slow and easy. When you sew it, you have to make sure the other side of the collar is folded away from the seam, so it won't get caught in the stitching. It helps to check a few times as you go to be sure it's clear of the needle. Clip your threads and flip the collar upright. The other edge of the open bottom of the collar will now fit over the body of the shirt. Tucking this edge to the inside by about 1/4 of an inch will make it line up along the seam you just created, but on the inside, giving you a nicely finished collar. I always finish this part by hand, just because it's easier in such a small scale. Finishing it with a hand needle gives me better control, but it does take a little bit.
Hey, Mama, I got something for you.
What'd you get for me? That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for you. It's for you.
Isn't that sweet? My daughter hardly ever comes into my workshop when she knows I'm recording something. But we're all excited for spring to be here, and that made my day. Since I like the black stitching on the sleeves, I decided to add a single black line of top stitching to the collar too. This isn't necessary, but I feel like it helped pull the design together a little more. To finish the front, I'll add a few black buttons sewn on with white thread. This shirt is much too small for functional buttonholes, so instead I'll complete it by sewing snaps underneath the buttons. And then it's finished. All that's left is one more trip to the ironing board, then it's ready to wear. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.